Hey, welcome back to Beginner Bible Study, week 19. We're just cruising right along through the Beatitudes, through the Sermon on the Mount. We're going to get into some amazing things that Jesus says with authority today. So stay tuned for more on Matthew chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 21 today. This week, we see Jesus assert his ultimate authority in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's one of my favorite sections of scripture because we've wanted to sit at the feet of Jesus. We've wanted to find out what Jesus really wants us to know. So many people are like, show me the will of God. How do I determine the will of God? The best way to understand what Jesus wants you to know is to sit at his feet. And the Sermon on the Mount is a sermon like no other. It is like no sermon that had ever been preached before, and like no sermon that will ever be preached again, because nobody could ever say these words with more authority than the one who authored them. That's where Jesus is standing. He is going to say, I want you to look at the old law. I want you to look at the commandments. I want you to look at the things that were told to Moses. And I'm going to take that command and I'm going to fulfill it. I'm going to show you how I'm going to make it full. And so we're going to look at that starting in verse 21. But I want you to look at a couple of things before we get going. I want you to remember that Jesus is going to redefine what life looks like. Kingdom living is what Jesus is calling this. This is life in the kingdom, and any other life is just existence. Life comes from being in the kingdom. That's where we get the blessedness, that made happy by God. This is the way. He tells us that life inside the kingdom is different from all forms of existence, and those who live in the kingdom are going to behave differently than those outside the kingdom. That's where we're getting at. We're getting at the nitty-gritty. How does a Christian act? How does the person in the kingdom, how does a kingdom woman or a kingdom man, how do they act? We're looking at behavior. So remember when we started our study of Jesus, I mentioned that he is coming to turn people away from the shadow and toward the substance. And Christ is always looking to say, that was the shadow, this is the substance. And you're really going to see that when we look at this section on the Sermon on the Mount. Now, Jesus, when he comes, we've talked about how he's interested in the heart of the human, not the law. The law was the shadow. The heart is really where he's after. And so you find that the kingdom person, the kingdom life, is one of wholehearted obedience. It's one that doesn't fill his heart with ugliness but have goodness on the outside. Like a dirty pan might look clean on the outside, lid looks good, you open it up and it's like 3 weeks ago lasagna or something, or spaghetti. That would be really gross, moldy and nasty. You would never eat it. That's how Jesus sees people who aren't giving their whole heart to him. So it's about wholehearted devotion. I want you to listen as we go through here to the absolute authority of Jesus. So I read that Jewish rabbis would often say, they would read a section from the scrolls, and then they would say, "Thus says the Lord. Thus saith the Lord." They were very concerned about blasphemy, right? They would never take authority because it wasn't theirs to take. These laws weren't from the rabbi. They were from God. And so if I were to repeat the commandments to you, thou shalt not murder, thus saith the Lord. That's how it was in that culture. And so interestingly, you're going to see Jesus with this amazing authority. This is total authority. Jesus is going to say, this is my law and I'm going to fulfill it. This is how I want it to look. This was mine first and I'm going to help you understand it better. I love this. This is Jesus's moment to shine. He's been warming up, and now it's showtime because he's going to use the word I say to you, not thus saith the Lord. I say to you, this is my command, and I'm going to tell you how to interpret it. So we're going to find out that he interprets it differently than the Jews maybe were interpreting it, or maybe than we interpret certain things. He is going to say, look at it from the outside, and I'm going to show you how to look at it. So let's begin reading in verse 21 of Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that all the ancients were told, you shall not commit murder, and whoever commits murder shall be liable to the court. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother shall be guilty before the court. Whoever says to his brother, Raca, shall be guilty before the Supreme Court. And whoever shall say, you fool, shall be guilty enough to go into the fiery hell. So I want to note that the meaning of the word here is not kill, it's literally murder. It's that premeditated purposefully taking another life. So we can go forward there. So the interesting thing is that Jesus is saying, okay, here's what you've been doing. Here's the law. Here's the letter. This is where you've been. So up until this point, you could hate your brother. And if you didn't murder him, you were good with the law. You're good. You could think that he was an absolute idiot. Think of like a cuss word that means you're an idiot. That's raka to the Jew. It's a curse word, and it means you're worthless. You're good for nothing. It's a very strong slam, that raka. So we have Jesus saying in verse 22, this is what you heard, but I say to you. He's taking, this is my command in the first place. I'm going to tell you how I want it interpreted. I want you to understand that anger and contempt and bitterness are the root of murder. He's going heart level with this. He is looking at all of the ways that our attitude creates our action. That's what Jesus is about. He's saying, you may not be murdering, but if you're having these things, these feelings in your heart, you're just as guilty as a murderer. And he's going to reiterate this over and over about the heart and where the heart is. So it gets even deeper here in verse 23. If therefore you are presenting your offering at the altar, and remember that your brother has something against you, leave your offering there on the altar and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and make your offering. So really, we look back in the Beatitudes, which began the Sermon on the Mount, and we see, blessed are the peacemakers. Made happy by God are those people who understand that God wants his people to be reconciled. He wants unity. He wants his people to be united and not bitter. So when you read kind of that first part, if therefore you're preparing to present your offering at the altar, I like to say for me in that section, Kelly, when you are in worship, when you are in a point of worshiping the Lord, because I feel like that's where I offer my first fruits to him. That is where I take everything that he has given me and I present it to him in worship. So if I go to worship and remember that my brother has something against me. So this is interesting because it takes the focus off of you, takes the focus off what you're feeling, and it's about what your brother's feeling. If he has something against you and you know about it, you need to go make it right. Because your worship, that pure, wonderful worship that Christians have the right to have with God, that is going to be it's going to be interfered with when we have bitterness or angst or we lack that reconciliation. We're made happy by God when we're peacemakers. So we understand from like the very end of verse 22 that it's not just about being guilty in front of the court. It's about the condition of our soul. And it doesn't come from meeting the letter of the law. I did not murder. But it's about that heart level that says, I want to reconcile with all men, and I will not hate, and I will not insult, and I will not find my fellow man to be worthless. Because again, remember, we're salt, we're light. Kingdom life, it is hard. It's hard living, but it's where we find the blessedness by God. The made happy by God are those who reconcile. That's the point of verse 21 to 25. He goes on, make friends quickly with your opponent at law while you're with him on the way, in order that your opponent might not deliver you to the judge and your judge to the officer and you be thrown into prison. For truly I say to you that you shall not come out of there until you have paid the last cent. This is like, don't be fighting with those people who might have power over you sometime. Make friends. Don't make enemies. When we see other people, we don't want to get right into the boxing mode. You know, let's go toe to toe. Make friends. Try to be peacekeepers, because that's where this wellspring is going to come up and you're going to have peace. You're going to have they're not going to have power to throw you into prison. So let's continue on with some authority from Jesus. 27 says, you have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. So this is one of the commands in the 10 Commandments, held dear by Jews, and people around the world all know these. You have heard it said that you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, there Jesus goes, I say to you, this would be earth-shattering for the Jew to hear this, to someone to command that much authority. I say to you that anyone who looks on a woman to lust for her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. So it's it's talking to males, but certainly it addresses females as well. See, Jewish people were very concerned with meeting the letter of the law. And can you imagine if we were to apply this letter of the law today? Like, for instance, in our own marriages, let's say, we would be able to, I'm sure they didn't have quite the access that we have today to all of this pornographic technology. So you could look at pornography, go to strip clubs, look at anything, think anything. And as long as you didn't commit adultery, you weren't breaking the law. And you could fill your heart with the evilest sexual thoughts. And as long as you didn't commit adultery, the actual physical act, you didn't break the law. And Jesus is like, that was to teach you what adultery was. And I'm going to teach you where it comes from, because your attitude creates your action. And Jesus says, I say to you that what's happening here at the heart level is what's making you guilty. It's not the physical act. The physical act is sort of the last frontier. It all begins with the heart. And Jesus is asserting so much authority here. He then goes on. Now remember, he's not being literal. He's talking about the heart. He's not talking physical. He's talking heart level. So listen to these next verses from the heart level. If your right eye causes you to stumble, tear it out and throw it from you, for it's better that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to fall into hell. If your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it from you, for it is better that one of the parts of your body perish than for your whole body to go into hell. So this isn't literal, but it's a huge, huge lesson for those who want to live in the kingdom. For those who are saying, I'm a city on the hill, I need to be salt. We need to look at the roots of what's causing our behavior. That's what Jesus is asking us to do. When we sit at his feet, he is saying, what is going on in your life that's causing you to do these behaviors, that's causing you to lust or to covet or to be jealous or to hate or to humiliate? That's all things we talked about. What are those roots and avenues? For me, one, it wasn't lust, but it kind of is. So I wasn't really lusting after men, but I was lusting after beautiful homes. So I would get all these magazines, country something, whatever, Pottery Barn even, and some other, whatever magazines or catalogs would come in the mail. And I would just sit and basically just lust over these beautiful homes. And then I look around at my house and go, this place is a dump. I have a beautiful home, but I'm thinking, yeah, this won't do. I need to paint. I need to save money and buy these striped cushions or whatever it is. And when I took a look at this and I thought, you know what, there's an avenue that's really causing me to stumble. And as much as I really liked my Better Homes and Gardens and all of my pretty little country magazines, I stopped my subscription to all of them. Martha Stewart, all. Even the Chip and Joanna Gaines Magnolia magazine. Gotta go, because it was a root of something in me that was causing me to feel like discontent. It was causing me to be covetous. I was thinking, well, I want that. I want that beautiful home. I want my house to look differently. And that was a root. That's what Jesus is saying. And so if it means getting rid of your catalogs or throwing out, breaking your computer because you've got a porn problem, pornography and an addiction to that is adultery. Because God says it's not the end result, it's the beginning. I care about your heart. I care about what this is. And the kingdom person has to be constantly almost like a mole. We're at the ground level looking at the roots, not worrying about what's growing up on top, because what's growing up on top all came from what's happening underneath. So the kingdom person is the person who says, those catalogs are making me stumble. As much as I like them, they gotta go. And I'm telling you, I have never been more content with what I have than when I got rid of those catalogs and those magazines. I'll occasionally look at one, it doesn't bother me, but to get them regularly, it's been huge for me to not have that as far as my contentment. So we're gonna end it there and just imagine the authority of Jesus in your own life. And what is he saying to you? You have heard it said, don't do this or that. You have heard it said, do this or that. But Jesus says, I say to you, examine your heart and see where you're at. Are you really fulfilling the fulfillment of that law? The law says don't murder, but to really fulfill it, we have to reconcile with our brethren before we can truly worship. To truly fulfill it, we have to cut out everything that would cause us to lust. We have to cut out everything that causes us to sin to truly fulfill the law of Christ, to be that open-hearted, wholehearted disciple. So next week we'll finish up the Sermon on the Mount, and then we'll keep going with the chronological life of Jesus. Thanks for joining us.